coming. So I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners, the Ngunnawal and Ngambri people, on whose lands we meet, and pay our respects to the elders past, present and emerging. We're excited to welcome Per Axelsson here as our first presenter in our Distinguished Speaker Series for 2020. This speaker series features some of the best researchers from around the world. Per has written and presented extensively about matters of health and living conditions, identity and colonialisation among the Indigenous Sámi population. Per is Associate Professor and Associate Dean of Research at the Faculty of Arts and Humanities, Umeå University, Sweden. Indigenous people in Sweden and Australia face similar health challenges. In Sweden, however, a crucial piece of the puzzle that would help explain the bigger picture is missing. Sweden lacks the significant data necessary to understand the state of health and social well-being of its only Indigenous population. Per is working to establish a comprehensive understanding of the present health and living conditions for the entire adult population in Jokkmokk municipality, a traditional Sámi area on Sámi terms. Here at RSPH, we are also working to understand how a connection to culture affects the health and well-being of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. Through the Maikawai study, a study created by and for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. While researchers from our school will certainly find Per's talk informative, his research is of interest to so many more, to the traditional owners of the land, to the Canberra community, to other researchers and policymakers, and anyone with an interest in the challenges facing First Nations people worldwide. And I think this relevance is reflected with a number of people who have turned up here tonight to listen to Per. I'd now like to ask Ngunnawal Elder Wally Bell to perform a welcome to country. Thanks, Wally.
Yuma. Hello. I'm a Ngunnawal man. I've grown up in country all my life. I did start off in a little place, it's not so little now, but it's a place called Yass. We lived on a little place called Oak Hill. And in my beginning, I suppose, you could consider that to be a fringe dwellers place, because Aboriginal people weren't allowed to live within the wider community. But it's a place where I learned a lot about being a Ngunnawal person, being an Aboriginal person, which was further enhanced when we moved out to a little place called Jurawa. If you don't know what that is, it's on the railway line between Yass and Gunny. It's a place where my father took me out on country and taught me all about the country itself, how to look for what it offers us as Aboriginal people, all the bush foods, bush medicines, the other food sources out there. And most importantly, where to source that one primary element that nobody or nothing on this planet can live without, and that's water. It's those teachings that have sort of led to where I am today. You know, I've gone through life, I've done my duty as a public servant. I spent 20 years in the Australian public service. But it didn't feel so comfortable, you get a good salary every fortnight and all that sort of thing, but there was something I felt that was lacking, and that is because I used to help my father with looking after our culture and country. So after my 20 years, I guess, in the public service, I felt a longing to get out onto country with my father and continue looking after our culture. And not only just looking after it, but also to build up a better awareness of what Aboriginal culture is and how diversified it is. When you look across Australia, there's over 400 different tribal groups. And our culture and our belief systems are based on where we come from, the place that we live in. My culture and my belief systems are going to be quite different to, say, people in Central Australia, different environments, and even quite different to the people that are pretty close by, that neighbour onto us, you know, like the Yuin people down on the coast. Again, different environments, different belief systems get developed from that environment. So that's something that people really find difficult to comprehend, I suppose. There's this thought that all our culture is one and the same. We do it all pretty much the same, but we don't. Because of the fact that we're in different environments right across Australia. And that's something I've been trying to convey a fair bit, because I do a lot of work here on the ANU campus itself. I conduct the Aboriginal cultural walks and talks on campus, and that's the message I'm trying to get across to people, is to build up a better awareness and a better understanding of who we are as Aboriginal people. Not just me as a Ngunnawal person, but the rest of Australia as well. It's important, I think, that people do learn about us as Aboriginal people, and like we weren't even thought of as people until quite recently. 1967, we were, people say we were given the vote, the right to vote. But prior to that, we weren't even being recognised as being people. We were placed in legislation that, that legislation said that we were classified under flora and fauna. Something, that a lot of people don't know. But there's, a lot of better understanding out there now. I guess it's from a lot of the work that my father did. He got out there and he really told people about who we are as people. And I'm trying to continue that in this day and age as well. And the rest of my family are doing the same sort of thing. The reason I'm here, I guess, is to welcome you guys onto our country. Now, a lot of people call us traditional owners, but I don't see us as being owners. I see us as being traditional custodians, carers of the country. Our beliefs and our customs tell us that as Aboriginal people, we have to look after the place that we live in. And we've been doing that now for a long time. Again, the ANU has helped us in establishing the fact that at our Birragai rock shelter, for instance, they did carbon dating on the floor, a core that was taken out of the floor of that rock shelter, and that was dated at 25,000 years. So that means that we've been here for at least 25,000 years, and that's only one place. There's other places around that we've occupied, and we do have a strong belief we've been here more than 25,000 years. But in that 25,000 years, then we live within the natural environment, and that's where we get all our customs and belief systems from. And my people, the Ngunnawal, we have 7 different clans. So to allow us to live in relative harmony, I guess, we had what we call our communal law. So all those different clan groups had to abide by their communal law. But as a group of people, the Ngunnawal people ourselves, we're also governed by what we call our traditional customary law, it's LORE. And all Aboriginal people right across Australia have to have their own law, and they all abide by that law. There's a lot of law out there, and we used to have special people that looked after the law and made sure that we were abiding by it. So one of those laws then that we have to abide by is primarily why I'm here today. I'm giving you a bit of a talk about, trying to give you a bit of a background about it as well. But the main reason I'm here is to welcome you guys onto country, because under our law, we have to make sure that visitors to our country are made welcome. We are then told that by our law that we must also not only make you welcome onto our country, but we must also protect and look after you while you're on country. We do that in two ways. We do that in a physical sense, and we also do it in a spiritual sense. So the spiritual part is as you're actually walking around on country, getting out into a beautiful natural environment out there in the nature reserves and things like that. The spirit of the land is going to look after you. So the spirit of the land tries to make sure that you're not going to have any nasty accidents, trips and falls and things like that. The spiritual protection is offered up by our ancestral spirits. Now, they're our past generations that have returned to the land. Because as Aboriginal people, our strongest belief is that we do come from the land. We're here for a little while to look after the place, and then we return back to the land. So that means that our ancestral spirits are going to look after you in a spiritual sense, because everybody here has your own personal aura. Now, that's something you carry with you all the way through your life. And at times that aura can be affected because, you're feeling sick or sad or grumpy or something like that, all those bad things. And we believe that is because there's bad spirit out there, something that sort of grabs hold or latches onto your aura. You don't know it's there because you can't see it and you can't feel it. But our belief systems tell us that it's there, so we've got to get rid of that from country as well, because that's not only going to affect you as a person, but the place that you're living on. So to be able to do that sort of stuff, we call upon those spirits. Our way of doing it, the normal people, is we make a bit of noise, just to let them know where I am, and I call for them to come and join me and welcome you on the country and looking after you while you're here. I do that with these things. Everybody knows clap sticks, of course. Okay. As I said, I do a lot of cultural heritage work. I'm out on country all the time, and I have a really strong connection with the country I live and work on. I can feel the presence of those spirits with us right now. Hopefully you guys can as well. I really want you to try and feel the presence of those spirits, because that'll give you a better feel for country. Okay. It is pretty strong. Okay, so the spirits then, like I said, they're going to look after you. The spirit of the land's going to look after you in that physical sense. And right now, our ancestral spirits are going around to everybody here, looking at your auras and checking out for that bad spirit that might be latched onto it. If they find it, they grab hold of it, get rid of it, chuck it off country. Because we don't want it here, you know. We don't want it to affect you as a person, and we don't want it to be affecting country out there as well. Now, I guess the only downside of that is, as I sort of mentioned, we've got neighbouring tribal groups, so we're probably tossing that bad stuff over into their country. The spirits then do ask that you do two things while you're on country. First one, really important one, respect this place that you're in. Look after it, care for it, as we have done for thousands of years now. We're really asking that you join us in doing that. The second thing they want you to do is also to respect and be kind and courteous to other people that you meet while you're on country. So if you do those two things, the spirits will harmonise with your stay on Ngunnawal country. So may the spirits be with you today, tomorrow, and for always. By always, I mean that even if you go off Ngunnawal country, the moment you put foot back on country, now that the spirits have seen you, they will look after you on your return. I'll finish with a few words in language, and they are Darawa, Nunna, Darawa, Ngunnawal, Yamalondi. This land is Ngunnawal land. Welcome. Thank you.
So I'd now like to welcome Associate Professor Per Axelsson to come and give his presentation on planning for healthy health and living conditions in Jokkmokk, Sámi, Sweden. Thank you. Over to you, Per. Thank you.
Thank you, and thanks for the welcoming country. I would start off would like to acknowledge the traditional owners or custodians of the land which we meet, the ancestors past, present and future. And then I will also like to thank ANU and Ray Lovett and his team for inviting me to give this lecture today, which is about something that we have been working on for the last 4 or 5 years, what we now call Haldi. Which I will talk to you about, but before doing that I will give you a little bit of presentation of where I'm from and who I am. So this is actually a picture of Umeå University. I don't know how many of you have been in that part of the world. One over there, right now. 2, you've been to Umeå?
Yeah.
Fantastic. Then you know that it's far north. Some of you might have been to Stockholm, and if you get into a car and you drive a further 7 hours north, you will hit Umeå. And then if you drive another 2.5 hours, you will reach the polar circle. That's how far north we are. And at the moment we have a lot of snow, and that's the way it's supposed to be in March. The university is 34,000 students, give or take, 4,000 employees, have 4 faculties, and was funded in 1965 on traditional Sámi territory, which was not acknowledged when the university was funded. It was not something that was part of Umeå University's idea of being a university at that point. Myself, I'm born and raised in this part of the world, and my 10 generations back we lived in the same small village. It's also on the traditional Sámi area. I do not consider myself indigenous Sámi, but I acknowledge that we live among Sámi ancestors and on the traditional land in the very far north. I have a wife and 2 kids as well, and a dog at the moment. At the university, it took some time for what we call sort of a research idea or research program devoted to indigenous research at the university. In year 2000, the Vardo Center for Sámi Research started to build up. And today it's led by Christer Stor, and we are about 25 researchers, and we're all in some way or the other connected to other centers or departments as well. So this is a pure research center. But history and culture, language, education, environment, society, and health are part of the pillars that the center rests upon. Today I will talk a little bit about, give an overview, because I don't think most of you have much knowledge of Sámi issues, indigenous Sámi issues in Sweden. So some of the population and colonial history, and current health and social outcomes, and talk a little bit about policy initiatives and what's next, actually, what's going to happen. And that's where we will end up in what we call HALDI, the Health and Living Conditions study that we are planning for, that will somewhat have some similarities to the work that Ray Lovett and his team is doing. So, Sámi people have been living on the northern parts of the Scandinavian peninsula since time immemorial. Today, or basically since the 17th century, 18th century, when the borders were drawn in the north, they now reside in 4 different countries. So from Norway, Sweden, Finland, and the Kola Peninsula of Russia is where Sámi people traditionally are living. Of course, some people are elsewhere as well, but this is the traditional area that's in the very north of Europe. So I often get the question, so how many Sámi are living in Sweden or in Scandinavia? And because of things that we will discuss later in the seminar, we can't really answer that. We don't have any good statistics. It's all approximations. While we know the number of immigrants by, the actual number, we have no idea of our ethnic groups in the Scandinavian countries. So these numbers are around, you can see everything from 80,000 Sámi to up to 140,000 in this part of the world. 9 different languages, Sámi languages, are being spoken. In the northern area of Sweden, there's now 5 recognized Sámi languages that have their own right to speak to, if you come into a health center or so on and so forth. So who is Sámi then? Well, since 1993 there is a Sámi parliament in Sweden, and to be able to enroll and list into the Sámi parliament, you need to consider yourself Sámi and has parents or grandparents that speak or spoke Sámi language at home. That means only 2 generations back. And then it could also be that you consider yourself Sámi and you have someone in your family that has been enrolled earlier in the Sámi parliaments. So that is how the Sámi parliament itself defines Sámi people. And we know, and it's common knowledge, that many people that in other cases are Sámi they don't care much about the Sámi parliament. They speak Sámi or do the daily work in the reindeer herding area, but they don't bother about the Sámi parliament, so they don't even enroll. So there's a lot of people in the Sámi parliament electoral register there should be more people in that electoral roll, basically. Some history then. What we know about health is, of course, because of our situation of research, is that before 1900 there was a health difference in the Sámi population compared to non-Sámi in the same region. Infant and childhood mortality was higher among Sámi than non-Sámi. But after the 1960s, there's been one project that had linked data from 1960 to the year 2000, based on the parliament electoral roll. And they found that from 1960 to 2002, there were no actual differences in Sámi health. If you were born Sámi or non-Sámi living in the same area, you would have the same sort of life expectancy and same sort of health issues. But you could, if you looked at the numbers more closely, you could see that there were differences for instance, cause of death, where Sámi people more often died in accidents, for instance, and much was related to reindeer herding. And reindeer herding is an occupation, and that is also something that has to do with the history of Swedish state policy. Reindeer herding can only be done in Sweden by a Sámi person. So if you're Swedish and you want to do reindeer herding, you can't. You have to show Sámi ancestry. And reindeer herding is a very dangerous occupation. You go with this snowmobile and so there's a lot of accidents as well, and so on and so forth. And drowning and freezing is also something that these numbers mainly discussed, and there were some differences. But on the overall picture, at the moment, there is, after 2002, we don't know basically anything, but before that, 1960, 2002, there were very few differences in for instance, life expectancy. Talking about Sámi policy, I think it's worthwhile to do, because the Swedish Sámi relationship is complicated. And before 1880, or basically before 1751, the border between Norway and Sweden was drawn. And at that point, no one really had any problems with Sámi people residing in the north. They were actually seen as guardians of the land, and there were no battles, there was just a pretty good relationship. And both countries, Sweden and Norway, Denmark at that point in time, decided that Sámi people, even if they drew the border, they would be able to move in any way they liked between the countries. There wouldn't be any regulations. They would only have to pay tax in one country. That was sort of the outcome. That was not the case if you fast forward to 1880. That's when the history sort of starts to be more and more complicated. And at this point in time, Swedish science were starting to pick up on what later would be called racial biology. And they had it was quite strong in Sweden at that time, and being Sámi and being a herder of reindeer and so on and so forth, that was looked upon as primitive and backward, while farming, on the other hand, that was supposed to be a typical Swedish occupation. That was the way forward, and that was civilized. So in 1880s, this idea about promoting agriculture on the expense of, for instance, reindeer herding took hold of the debate, and there were created reindeer herding laws in 1886, and there was one again in 1898, and then again in 1928. And these were crucial for Sámi identity of today, because in 1928 it was basically said that you have to be a reindeer herder to be Sámi. All if you were not doing reindeer herding, even if you spoke Sámi at home or you you fished on your traditional ancestors' land, or you did whatever you did. Even if you did that, you were not Sámi anymore. So from 1928 and onwards, a Sámi in the state, in the eyes of the state, that was a reindeer herder. And that is something that we still are, that still sort of makes these discussions around identity very complicated. And furthermore, there was policies that Sámi people should remain Sámi people. There was a policy called the Lapp should remain a Lapp. Because that was the idea from the state was that they were destined to do herding and they should continue to do that. And this was something that was a big thing in the State Institute of Racial Biology that was set up in 1922. This was something that the Swedish state, all political parties at that time, thought this was a great idea. And this was the first racial biology institute in the world where sort of of course the white male European was the normal, and all other peoples were deviants from that. There were Sámi school systems, particularly for Sámi. We've seen forced migration of Sámi families that we don't see in the Swedish case. And there was a strong social Darwinism. You thought that, or the state thought that Sámi people will eventually die out. So we just they just do their reindeer herding and they will vanish from the land eventually, and we can claim ownership of it. And this is also at the same time, this is where the Swedish welfare state started to get traction, because they also wanted the land. So from 1880 and onwards, the Swedish state took over the ownership of the land formally. And forestry, mining became really important, and hydroelectric power development and stuff that became really important and became important for Swedish economy, and but crucial for Sámi people, of course. So what we see in terms of colonization, especially among Sámi reindeer herders, is that everything that had to do with industries, if they were in mining or if there was forestry or hydroelectric power development, that inflicted on the reindeer herders a way of being able to herd on the traditional lands, because more and more people were moving up, more and more industries were being developed, and the areas of traditional reindeer herding diminished every year. And still this is a problem with new windmills and everything that has to do with the land. But of course there's another side of the story. There's also, since at least early 20th century, there's a strong political Sámi movement. Small, sort of small but strong. The first Nordic meeting we celebrated 3 years ago, the meeting in Trondheim in Norway, when they came together and formulated this: we're not going to take it, we're not going to be run over by the Norwegian, Danish, Swedish governments, and they started to formulate an agenda. That took some time. In Sweden you can see what we call the Sámi National Agency, perhaps, in English, established in 1950, that has a really strong voice. And from 1993 we have a parliament in Sweden, but before that we have, in the 80s, it was in Norway, and I think late 70s in Finland, Sámi parliaments were established. So now there's a forum, and there's someone that can speak, or you see a picture there, of course, of the current Sámi. Is it the current? Maybe that's a couple of years back. Of the delegates in the Sámi parliament that have a say in questions around this. So let's turn back to Sámi health then. And so now you get the picture that I hope you get the picture that there's a complicated relationship still between the Swedish state and Sámi parliament and people. And when it comes back to Sámi health, we did a systematic review last year, going over what sort of somatic health differences we can see, and basically we still see, when we collected the material, that there are very few differences among Sámi and non-Sámi. And that, of course, is something in comparison to, on a global scale, indigenous people worldwide would like to know what has happened. If there's something that, because that's not the general picture you get if you look at indigenous health globally. But at the same time, there are some really difficult issues. This is part of a Norwich Lancet cooperation that came out 2016, I think, where you see, this is a picture of life expectancy. And of course you have Australia over there somewhere where there's based on these data, it's a 10-year difference if you're born into a Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander family or not in life expectancy. And in the Swedish case, it's 0.3, and in Norway it's 1.6 to the disadvantages of Sámi people. And that's the Swedish numbers are basically crap. So what we used in this study, we used Sweden as an example of a country that has one of the most efficient and effective statistical systems, but we cannot do anything in comparison to ethnicity. And so we stated, we said that we built on a very crude way Sámi administrative areas, and just looked at the picture from a very top sort of, not individual data in any way. Just to show that we have the data to do everything, but we can't do indigenous, non-indigenous, for instance. And this is a critique that Sweden has been giving for a long time, since I could say the 2007, Paul Hunt, the Special Rapporteur on Health, critiqued Sweden for being unable to say anything around Sámi health. And this is what we also put forward in the Lancet study, and in the recent OECD report that came out last year, the same critique all over again. Sweden are not doing anything to being able to monitor health in the only indigenous population that live in the side of the Swedish borders. And this goes back to this problem, that what we now call the GDPR, which is the General Data Protection Regulation, I think it's called, and it's something that's Sweden, alongside of the most European states, have adopted, where it says that in official data, official statistics, it's forbidden to process personal data revealing racial or ethnic origin. And also political opinions, religious or philosophical beliefs, and memberships in a trade union, for some reason. Well, this is what we call sensitive data. Yeah, and we have been asking ourselves, to whom is this sensitive? Why is it sensitive to collect ethnic data? Because most of the world countries have that in their censuses and so on and so forth. So we collect information on citizenship. That's the only thing. So we have a lot of understanding around immigration issues, but none about ethnic groups within our own country. And we don't have a census like you guys. We have a register-based system, which means that when you're born, you get a personal number, and that follows you from cradle to death. That's the only number you use for going to school, opening a bank account, elderly care, whatever it is. It's the only number you use. For my bank, for educational purposes as well. And so there's no census, there's no way, it's just a black box with that number that follows you in registers everywhere. So there's not a possibility, at least at the moment, to open it up and ask a self-identification question, because the system is closed. So, what do we do then? And also, this is part of the problem is that we've also been told that this is sensitive, and we've learned that ethnic data is sensitive in Sweden, and that goes for everyone. I've learned it. My mother and father and everyone has learned that ethnic data is something bad and could be used for the wrong purposes, and most possibly will be used for the wrong purposes. So when you want to do health service and ask an ethnicity question, you need to know this, and you need to prepare for the discussion as well on why and how this is the case. So this is a study made of a friend of mine. She haven't published it yet, but she did a study of women living in Kiruna, Gällivare in the very north. They were registered in the Sámi parliament role. They were also, or could be also, reindeer owners and reindeer herders. So in the Swedish state system, they were Sámi. And so she invited 751 women and asked an ethnicity question just to make sure. And this is what her outcome was. Of these that were part of these registers, 12% did not consider themselves Sámi, but they were picked up as Sámi, and 6% were ambivalent, which is kind of interesting, she thought. So she also asked them to write stuff in an open-ended question, and these are some of the problems, some of the quotes that came up. I'm married to a reindeer herder and the mother of 3 sons who are Sámi, but that doesn't make me Sámi. You cannot marry to become Sámi. I'm married to a Sámi and speak a language fluently. Because of that, I consider myself Sámi. That's the opposite side. I'm married to a Sámi but born Swedish. I think of myself as Swede, not Sámi. This is also something I've been told over and over again by Sámi people. And then there was this other group as well that said, I'm absolutely not interested in participating in this survey. I think that your way of selecting the study group should be questioned. It's insulting to minority groups exposed to this questionnaire. Someone thought it was discriminatory, wanted to be treated as Swedes, and this feels uncomfortable, racist, and I don't want to participate. So that was some of the questions that she herself, a Sámi researcher, well known in the area, coming from a long traditional background, herself a reindeer herder, was being given back from the community. So that's the sensitivity around these questions still remain. And these were some other. There was this woman was not Sámi because she wasn't a mountain Sámi, or not living the Sámi lifestyle, or not speaking Sámi languages, or judged by non-Sámi, judged non-Sámi by other Sámis. So there are some blurry definitions that goes back to the reindeer herding law, of course. Those that are reindeer herders have a much more, how do you put it, grounded way of looking at their identity. But if you're not a reindeer herder, but your grandparents or yourself speak Sámi fluently, and so on and so forth, you may not look upon yourself as Sámi anyway. So when you're planning for research, you need to know this, you need to have that sort of background, and also need to understand that research in the Sámi community is not necessarily looked with upon as a good thing, and also that goes back to history, of course. Until the 1990s, the research that had been done with Sámi people or Sámi communities was done on and never with communities. There's been some change, and nowadays there's a lot more discussion around this, and the Sámi Parliament has stepped up, I think, in a good way. And we are developing ethical guidelines. We don't have ethical guidelines around research, Sámi research, for instance. The Norwegian Sámi Parliament has started to do that work, and we are following that closely. And they have put forward some guidelines for health research, but they have yet to be adopted in Norway. But if that's the case, then I think we will have a discussion on moving them into the Swedish context. But then again, coming back to identification, still we found in several publications later on from 2015 and onwards that there is an increasing willingness to self-identify nowadays than it was perhaps 10 years ago. So we are seeing more like, I think it's also pushed by a younger generation that you have a revitalization of your culture and you want to self-identify. And that's something that we see and reflect in the work that we are doing currently. So what's happening at the moment around these issues? Well, there's a discussion now that we should put all cards on the table when it comes to research and also the history, and do a Sámi Truth and Reconciliation Commission, and that's probably going to happen, where research, where everything from racial biology and onwards will be discussed, hopefully, and written about. So that's something that's on the radar. And then it's also this, the study that we are planning to do. And we are doing this in close collaboration with Jokkmokk municipality and Sámi communities in that area. And what we want to do is to develop and test quantitative and qualitative material, and generate results that can be useful to the community at first, and then also to Swedish state in the end as well. But the idea of Haldi is mainly to work on a community-based study. And well, I should say that we are doing this because I was one of those, I've been complaining for 10 years perhaps of how bad Sweden is around being able to do anything. And a colleague of mine, Christina, we started to discuss this perhaps 6 or 7 years ago. If we don't complain, what could we do? So if we just say, what are the possibilities we have? And then there's a Norwegian study called Sámi that has paved the way on the Norwegian side. And they are doing community-based questionnaires and also clinical studies in small municipalities in the north of Norway. And we started to discuss with them and follow that up, and are now doing a sort of a sister study to the Sámi study. That's the plan. So in 2015, SSHF, that is the Sámi Center Health Research Unit in Norway, that we went up and visited and worked together with them to create a research plan. After we just had an initial discussion, we went immediately to the Sámi Parliament and said, is this something you want? Would you like us to continue? Or should we just not do this? But they endorsed our work, and so we have a letter of support from the Sámi Parliament, and then started to work with a municipality, Jokkmokk, which is the heart of Sápmi, the traditional area of Sápmi. We've had a dialogue with the Swedish Public Health Agency, and they are also supporting us as well, because they basically can't do anything at the moment. In 2017 we have a memorandum of understanding with the Norwegian health study Sámi, and from 2018 we got some funding to actually go out and ask Sámi communities or focus groups with Sámi people that if we were to do a study, what sort of questions would you like us to not forget, basically? What are the important questions that you want answered? So that study is something that we are now starting to analyze the focus group material, and it's going to be interesting. And at the same time, the Norwegian study is doing the same thing. So they are going back into Sámi communities and also asking them, what sort of questions would you like us to answer? So we will bring our results together, and then also try to bring a study that will forget about the border between Norway and Sweden, like it was supposed to be. And we'll see how that goes. But that's what we want. And also just at the start of this year, or at the end of around Christmas time, we got funding to do a pilot in Jokkmokk municipality by a private funding funder, Wallenberg, for full steam ahead. So this is the area in the north of Sweden, which is Jokkmokk Jokkmokk municipality. I hope you see that in the northern parts there, the little light area. And that is where we, from now on and for 4 years to come, will do this. We will do the health clinical study, collect the data, and then we will do the research and giving back to the community up until 2024. That's when we expect us to have done the work. And hopefully we can evaluate and then offer a similar study to other municipalities in the north of Sweden. But we need to do the pilot to see where we are at and what works and what's not working. So that's our plan. Okay, so these at the moment are the people that are involved. So my colleague Kristina Stolmienna we are the two who have worked early on with this, and then we have support from Katarina Negga, who is a medical doctor as well as a associate professor in epidemiology, and also we have researchers from different fields that will help us do this, from psychology, nutrition, statistics, so on and so forth. And we also have the Jokkmokk Health Center, where we have 2 doctors and 2 district nurses who will help us carry out the study. And some of the partners I already mentioned. So these are some of the questions that the focus group study will answer. So what questions are important in a health survey that includes Sámi society? How should you identify ethnicity? How would you like that question to be framed? Is it just one question or is it multiple questions? Who should carry out the research? Should it be indigenous, a non-indigenous researcher? Or should it be a mix? Or what are the thoughts? How should results be reported? In what form would you like them to be sent back to you? And also, who should govern the data? Who should own the data that we actually collect? These are some of the questions and many more that we had in those focus groups and that we are hopefully will be able to publish something on later on this year. I thought that I would share with you at least one discussion around indigenous data sovereignty that's become a concept quite strong here, I assume, in Australia and New Zealand. It's discussed. In Sweden, it's not, mainly because we haven't had that understanding or the discussion yet. But so we asked that question to the focus groups, and we can see that the tentative results are that data and management of data are a matter of importance. It's something that should be discussed. But then again, the fear still exists that science and research data is something that could be used for the wrong purposes. The history of the Nazi regime, racial biology, everything around that comes up in these focus groups, yet again. And there's a lack of trust around these issues. Sámi authorities, preferably the Sámi parliament, should have the responsibility for data around indigenous Sámi. But most also expressed that at the moment the Sámi parliament does not have the capacity to take care of data, or but that will hopefully we can develop further as we go along. So this is just why did I put this in? Yeah, so this is actually my worksheet. This is what I had to do before 2021, when we will have the data collection. And it contains everything that has to do with publication plans, but also how to reach people, how to inform people, how to, everything that has to do with employ people and laboratories and ethical issues and stuff like that. And developing a questionnaire that's working, and a clinical study as well. Finding a place for having the clinical study is also a little bit tricky, but we are sorting that out. Thank you.